Good morning, ladies and germs. Let's talk about your coronavirus and political update for Stupid Tuesday. So, who really believes that the market rebound is about an improved outlook for coronavirus? Well, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. If anything, the coronavirus situation is deteriorating quite rapidly. A bunch of Iran's leadership appears to have it. We have a huge problem around the world in terms of people coming down with it and showing up with it. The Washington State thing is even more amusing. Kirkland, you got that. Of course, all the wonderful street shitters in San Francisco have yet to blow up, but that's going to be a huge problem. All of the blue states, who really thinks that this is going to work out well for all these people? I think that's just a complete load of bullshit. So, what makes people think that the 1,200-point move wasn't leaked information about two things? One was the G7 meeting, and then, of course, what the Fed just did. But more importantly, not even so much there, because, if you look at huge spike in the futures and the stock market as soon as Fed makes his announcement, Powell does his thing. Now he's holding a press conference, and essentially that entire spike has bled back off. Okay, so now we're back. All things considered, the Dow's negative, and it was from well down to way up. Yeah, okay. Secondly, Federal Reserve cutting rates does absolutely nothing to make you decide that you're going to get off your ass and go take a cruise or get on an airplane. You want to talk about doing stupid things, getting on an airplane if you are somehow susceptible to the virus because you're immune compromised or you're old is probably the last thing you want to do. It will do nothing to help the supply chain problems because those supply chain problems are a result of using slave labor in third world nations. And cutting rates does nothing to help that problem. The only thing that helps that problem hurts stock prices, which is getting the supply chain out of third world nations and having diversity of supply chains so that when you have one area, it is a 5% issue instead of a 90% issue. This is especially true for things like, pharmaceuticals, having those offshore brain dead stupid. And by the way, thank you, President Bush. Thank you, President Clinton. Thank you, President Obama. And thank you, President Trump. If anything, Trump has tried to do something about it, but he hasn't been very forceful, and neither has Congress. Congress, in fact, wants exactly the other way. Everybody loves soaring stock prices, right? Nobody likes ones that go down. The problem is that just like I can make a lot of money if I build a bridge, but I take all of the safety factor out, therefore my materials and my labor costs are much lower, this pumps up the price of my company, right? Right up until said bridge collapses. Oops. Oh, nobody cared about that when the stock prices were going. How about when they're going down? Why are people being held to account? Yeah, that's a little bit of a problem. But what has changed in the last 48 hours? Nothing. So what's really going on here? Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. How convenient that the day before Stupid Tuesday primaries, we have two, not just one, two candidates who've already paid, they've already put in the infrastructure, they've already put in the ads, they've already put in the staff, they've already printed up the signs, they've stuck them in people's lawns. They've already done all these things. They've already done all the work. And less than 24 hours before the primary is held, all of a sudden they both throw their so-called support to Biden and say, we're done, we're out. Really? Did you get bribed? Or did the establishment warn you that, hey, we got to do something about Sanders? And oh, by the way, Sanders is about to run away with the game because he has a huge lead, similar to what Biden won by in California. California is, of course, the state with the largest number of delegates that is voting today. I don't know what Sanders looks like in Texas. That's going to be an interesting question. The other thing is, I don't know if you can necessarily trust polls. As I said, I wasn't going to be surprised if Biden won in South Carolina. I was very surprised he won by 30 points. That shocked me. I didn't think that was going to happen. But, he did. Okay. Jerome Powell, however, just got up and out of the middle of nowhere declared that the U.S. economy is fucked. Well, do you remember when Hank Paulson and bazookas, the beginning of 2008? Remember this? The beginning of 2000, after Bear Stearns, right? Bear Stearns blew up. You do remember all this, right? Was that the bottom of the stock market? Was that the end of the pain? Was all of that stuff that they did and all those things that they said, was all of that a declaration of desperation? Which was it, folks? Historically speaking, which was it? What do you think Jerome Powell's doing right now, sitting up behind a podium as I'm recording this? I'm not listening to it because I'm recording a podcast. But what do you think was really going on there in his head? What do you think's really going on in everybody's head right now? Is this we're going to try to provide some assistance and by the way, in 2008, the Fed cutting rates and providing liquidity actually had some bearing on what was going on. Okay, it was still the wrong move because the root of what it was happening was fraud. Providing liquidity to a fraudulent enterprise just enables more fraud. And probably, if you get down to it, probably actually made the situation worse. I doubt it made it any better. At best, it was neutral. This has no chance of addressing the actual issue because the issue has nothing to do with monetary policy. It has nothing to do with credit conditions. It has to do with consumer confidence, which has nothing to do with interest rates in this context. You're not having any trouble getting money on your credit card or being able to buy a house in terms of mortgage rates. Okay? You're not having a problem with that. You're not having any problem buying gasoline. Gasoline prices are actually coming down because oil prices are coming down. So gas is cheaper. These are all good things, right? We supposedly have a very strong economy, very strong job market. Excuse me? What are you doing all this shit for? Well, we all know why, because the stock market screamed with a 9%-ish downward move. And then, oh boy, so we're going to do this. But folks, it has nothing to do with that, okay? The bounce that you saw yesterday, a large one, was all about Joe Biden. It wasn't about the Fed. It wasn't about any of those things. It's about Joe Biden. And now you have Joe Biden essentially announcing an intent to foment civil war. The man has dementia. Okay, the only excuse I can give that I can give at this point, and folks, it really is serious. Listen, you're demented to say you're going to appoint Beto as your gun czar when Beto has already said he's literally going to come around and take guns door to door. I mean, you are talking about a declaration of civil war in the United States. You are out of your fucking mind as a candidate to make a statement like that. You're crazy. Or you're an all-on communist and you really don't care if there are millions of dead people because you intend to kill them anyway. Biden's just, he's nuts. But he's not nuts as in insane. He's nuts as in demented. He has dementia. He's mentally ill. It's not his fault. It's old age related, I'm sure. But you want to talk about somebody who's absolutely unqualified by virtue of mental incapacity to be president of the United States? It's him. I mean, it's one thing to say somebody's crazy like Bernie, Okay, Bernie's not demented. Bernie's just crazy, at least in my opinion. I mean, listen, what he wants to do is essentially, he's all on Bolshevik. Biden isn't a question of Bolshevism. Biden's a question of illness. He's old and he's sick. And you know what? Listen, a lot of people, when they get to be his age, have issues like that, all right? It's sad. But he sure as hell shouldn't have anything to do with running the country. Oh, my God. All right, let's talk coronavirus. The Kirkland thing is out of control, and it's going to continue to be. It's everywhere at this point. We have the CDC that knowingly shipped bad test kits. All right, that's now come out. I remind you that Theranos was literally destroyed by doing essentially the same thing. And that was just people's personal health. This is public health. It was far more serious. The CDC, however, nobody's going to go to jail for that. All right. It wasn't concealed for very long, but it was concealed. And the people who concealed it will not be punished. There's no punishment there either. So, I mean, guys, let's just get down to brass tacks here. It's here. It's in the United States. As I have pointed out several times, I may have already had it. Other people may have already had it too. There are many other things like this that are going on in that regard. Look, one of the biggest problems we have right now in the context of this coronavirus is one that nobody's talking about. I just wrote an article on it, and that is that the governments generally have the authority, and I don't know anybody in their right mind who would question it, to order quarantines. Okay, I don't think that's something that's surprising, that the government would order quarantines. I don't. I don't. All right, and listen, I know the libertarian. There are probably some libertarians who would take some issue with this, but quite frankly, public health is one of those things. I mean, that's why you have governments. Okay, if you're not going to allow the government to have a public health role, then I guess there really isn't a reason for a government at all. But the problem is that the government does not have the authority to cause you to spend an unlimited amount of your own money at someone else's direction and at their choice. It is one thing to issue a quarantine order that you stay in your house. That I can defend. But that's not what's happening. The federal government is apparently quarantining people in hospitals, and then they're getting billed for it. Now, I had some spotty reports on this a few days ago. Now I'm starting to get some more of them. There's some showing up in the media. Daily Cause, by the way, picked up on this, and they're going to use this as an argument for Medicare for all and socialized medicine, all this. No, it's simpler than that. That's armed robbery, folks. That is literal armed robbery at the behest of the pharmaceutical medical industry that's already consuming $1.05 through felony force and fraud, actions that have been illegal under the law, felony illegal, for more than 100 years under 15 United States Code. Now we have that isn't a big enough thing to extract money from you. So now they claim, well, you might have had contact with blah. You're under isolation, and oh, by the way, in the hospital you go, and you get the bill for it. Bullshit. If you want to order me to stay in my own house for 3 weeks or something like this, okay, you could probably do that. All right, we had those kinds of situations arise in the past. We've had them arise on a spotty basis with other infectious diseases. I don't have much of a quarrel with that. It's another thing, however, when they order you into a hospital and then send you the bill for it. If they're going to do that, they pay, period. End of discussion. And that has to be the beginning of a discussion. We need to make a couple of things very clear. All right? One of them is that we will not, as Americans, tolerate. We will resist it using whatever means are necessary. And I mean that. We will not allow it. The second is that Mark Meadows is out this morning, and I don't know if he's telling the truth or not, but I put a tweet out about this and said that this is 1776 stuff, that there are people in the Congress who are trying to tie coronavirus funding to renewal of FISA with no conditions. In other words, so they can use it to spy on Republicans again. All right? Those two things are absolutely unrelated. And trying to use one to do the other, which, by the way, was also a criminal act, is something that we as Americans must not tolerate as well. For most people, and as I have said since this began, for most healthy people, is this virus more deadly than the seasonal flu? Probably. But is it in the same order of magnitude, the same relative area of risk? Yes, it is. Now, if you happen to be at high risk, this thing is really bad. But for most of us, we're not. I'm not. Most people are not. If you are, and especially if you live in a place where the government has already shown its malfeasance and misfeasance with regards to management of this thing, i.e. the entire SeaTac area in Washington State. And by the way, if you think that's the only place that kind of thing's going on, you're dead wrong. It's everywhere. Okay? The question is degree. But the more blue your area is, the more likely it is that you're going to be lied to and things are going to be obfuscated, and then you're going to try to be jacked in some form or fashion out of your wallet or out of your life. You ought to think about that. Okay? You really ought to think about that. Because if you are at high risk, you're not going to get help from the government. You're going to get buried by it. Quite possibly literally. For everybody else, not so much. And I am, as I said, my door's not bolted. Am I, cutting back a little bit on my close interpersonal? Yeah, I mean, if I was going to be in a, large sporting event or something, I'd probably think twice about it. I think that's kind of a bad idea. All right. But look, Powell shot his wad. His supposed response, he got nothing out of it. The Dow, as I'm finishing this podcast, is down almost 300 points. The S&P is negative. The NASDAQ is barely positive. Essentially, all the pump that went on from the close yesterday, including from the announcement, has now come off. There's no there. Okay? And again, though, is this really about the Fed? Is this really about coronavirus? No, it's not, folks. But when it comes to the coronavirus thing, the supply disruptions are very meaningful. And the demand disruption is going to be a problem, too. But again, here we are. Steve Herman, okay, from VOA, breathlessly reporting. He just put up a tweet. About 3.4% of reported COVID-19 patients have died, according to Dr. Tedros coronavirus. And, of course, this, if you read that, 3.4%, my God, your hair's on fire, because that is way beyond the seasonal flu. Way beyond. I mean, like more than an order of magnitude. We're now, almost 1.5 orders of magnitude, probably, maybe more. But remember, but see, that's because you didn't read it carefully. All right? Fourth word on the line. About 3.4% of reported coronavirus patients. If you got sick and you had COVID-19, you had coronavirus, and you did those things, but you never went to the doctor because you weren't very sick. You felt like shit. Maybe you had a little bit of a fever. You took some Tylenol, some ibuprofen, some aspirin, some cough drops, a little Ricola. Maybe you gargled with some Lagavulin like I did, and of course you didn't spit that because it's too damned expensive. Hey, listen, it's not a stomach bug. Why? May as well get some value out of it, right? And and you did that a little bit, and then everything seemed to be okay. And and a few days later you're on the mend. And what if that was coronavirus? I don't know that it was, folks, because I've never been tested. Okay, and I don't think there's an antibody test at this point. There certainly isn't one that I could take in my own home that nobody else would have the results, and I'm sure as hell not going to let anybody else have it because, hey, the way things are going right now, they might order me into a hospital to spend $20,000 of my own money. And then I would be faced with a very ugly set of choices, which I really, if I can avoid having to make that decision right now, and do what I feel would have to be done under that set of circumstances, I'd really prefer to not be faced with that set of choices. All right. Obviously, if you get badly sick, well, then it is what it is. All right. I mean, I'm not. Listen, folks. If you're seriously ill, this thing is going to expose the soft underbelly of the so-called health scam system to so many people in this country. Yeah. Oh my God. But the thing is, it's not going to happen for most people, because for the vast majority of people, this thing's just not going to be any worse than what you'd expect from getting the flu. It's just not. And so there it is. But again, the Fed has shot their wad. They got nothing. Fundamentals of the U.S. economy remain strong. Of course, Trump is out there screaming, the Fed Reserve must cut, must further ease, and importantly, come into line with other countries and competitors. In other words, we must have negative rates and do QE because somebody else does. You realize how stupid that is? I sent him back a 2-word answer. The second word was you. I'm sure you can figure out what the first one was, and I posted it publicly too. Because that's exactly what it deserves. But so many of the country, half the nation, is literally buying knee pads. I mean, you ought to go long Chinese knee pad manufacturers for all the Trump-omomics. All right. So anyway, that's where we are, folks. No change overnight, other than that the obfuscation that you're having and the deaths. Hey, listen, I hate it when I'm right. And when this first thing out in Kirkland was announced, I said, this is going to kill a bunch of people in that nursing home. Well, guess what? We're about half the way to the number of people that I thought would die there that were patients. The rest are probably going to go too. Maybe it'll be worse than that. Maybe it'll be a little better. Who knows? But we're in the range, the order of magnitude, that fits with my expectations at this point. And that sucks. There's times I hate being right. And this was willful blindness by the people out there. Not to mention all the screaming from people in the so-called EMS and other... folks, it's jumped everywhere. This is what happens when you trust the government to give you honest information, and they never do. And you keep going back to the trough and back to the trough and saying, no, more. When do the people of this country stand up and say, that's enough? What are you going to do? You're going to riot if you don't get Bernie? Well, what's Bernie going to do? Bernie's a Bolshevik. So what is he going to do? Well, you think socialism or all on communism is going to fix this? How's it working out for the Hermit Kingdom? How did it work out for the Chinese? How many people did they have that died over in Wuhan? How many people got sick over there? You want to advocate for that? You want that model? Well, how did it work out for you? If you actually advocate for and pass that and put that into place, you deserve what they got. And by the way, maybe you'll be one of those people that goes and makes shoes for Nike. Oh yeah, that's the other thing is, becoming more and more clear, right? You're the wrong, you pray the wrong way, you get to go make shoes for Nike on a forced basis. Real no bullshit slavery in 2020. We actually still have it in the world. And our country not only backs this up and does its thing with it, but we think it's fantastic. Isn't that lovely? We have a company that makes phones that people like. They're selling for almost $300 a share, slave labor from workers in China. Air Jordans, all these other wonderful things that shoes and things that Nike made, same deal. Dozens of other countries. It's not just two companies. I'm sorry. It's not just two. Be nice if it was. It isn't. That's even worse, right? Yeah. All right, folks. Going to close this one out. Dow's down 500 points. Here we go. Yeah, so much for the bazooka. Look at my Twitter feed. I showed him what he did. Anyway, have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon.